So it is exactly 1 o'clock. I will just start off by confirming with our clerk. Elizabeth, do we have any regrets for today from our committee members?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, we have received regrets from Francis Smith, who's unable to join us. I see that Councillor Neal has just joined us, and I'm hoping that Councillor Doherty will be on soon, but I have not heard from her. Otherwise, we do have the rest of the committee present at this moment. And through you, if I could, just to allow those who are watching at home to know who is present in the meeting at this time. Joining us from staff is Ruth Nordegraff, Director of Housing and Social Services, as well as Julia McCarty-Jansman, who is our host, and I myself am Elizabeth Fawcett, Committee Clerk for this committee. We also have joining us Mary Lynn Cousins-Brahm, who is the CEO of Kingston and Frontenac Housing Corporation, and Denise Cummings, who is the Chair of the Board of Directors for Kingston and Frontenac Housing Corporation, who are present in order to provide a delegation this afternoon. And with that, Madam Chair, we have 6 members of the public in the gallery at this time watching, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I will call the meeting to order now. Oh, and hello, Councillor Doherty. Nice to see you. Perfect. So we will begin with the approval of the agenda. Please note that we do have an addendum which has just been added. So I will require a motion to approve the agenda, which includes the addendum that has been circulated to the committee. May I have a first, please? Thank you. I saw Councillor Doherty, and for second, I think I saw Mr. Clark. Oh, and Mrs. White. Thank you. And may I see a show of hands for all in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, so we will move over to the confirmation of minutes. So you've got the minutes attached. I will require one motion only for the approval of both sets of minutes. If I could please have a first. Thank you, Councillor Neal, and a second. Thank you, Ms. McCarty. And if I may please have a show of hands for all in favor. Thank you so much. So we'll move over to disclosure of pecuniary interest. Is there any from anyone on our committee? No? Perfect. So seeing none, we'll move over to delegations. So today we do have Mary Lynn Cousins-Brahm, CEO of Kingston and Frontenac Housing Corporation, as well as Denise Cummings, Chair of the Board of Directors for the Kingston and Frontenac Housing Corporation, who are present to speak to the committee regarding an update on Kingston and Frontenac Housing Corporation. And before turning the floor over to Mary Lynn Cousins-Brahm and Denise Cummings, I understand that they have asked for an extended time, about 10 minutes, to speak to the committee, and I agree with this. So if anyone disagrees with this, please note this now. Perfect. So that will be acceptable then. So Ms. Cousins-Brahm and Ms. Cummings, welcome.
Thank you so much for allowing Denise and I to speak with you today and to provide you an update and just to outline some of the reality in which KFHC is facing today. So I know we have very limited time, but I felt I needed to provide you with a presentation to provide you with as much information in as short a time as possible. And I'm hoping at the end that there might be an opportunity for questions. And at that time, if there's any related to governance and the board, Denise Cummings will address those and I'll deal with the operating issues. Next slide, please. So for KFHC, for many of you, you know that the province downloaded housing in 2000. And in 2000, KFHC became an independent housing corporation, which is arm's length of our municipality, and the city is our sole shareholder. For KFHC, we are governed by a shareholders agreement and the board by bylaw number 1. We have a board of directors consisting of 8 with 6 community members and 2 city councilors. And to get on the board of directors, it is through the nominations committee of city council. Our board governance structure, it's a governance model and not an operations board. And we're governed by many legislations, but 2 key ones for us is the Housing Services Act and the Residential Tenancy Act. Next, please. KFHC, we have a strategic plan, a 5-year plan that's currently in place until 2023. We have 3 main priorities: to provide and maintain affordable quality homes that build tenant engagement and pride. We want to build new affordable housing solutions to meet the community emerging needs and strengthen organizational resiliency and capacity to ensure long-term sustainability. So that's just a quick overview of our priorities. Next, please. So I want to spend some time on the housing programs that KFHC provides. As you know, KFHC has just purchased THK's assets, Townhomes Kingston, their business and assets. So I'm talking about the merged assets here. So together we have a little over 1,200 rent geared to income units. Often it's called social housing, public housing. And this is where tenants receive a unit that is subsidized no more than 30% of their income. So we have 1,218 rent geared to income units. They range from bachelor apartments to very large 5-bedroom townhouses, and they're throughout the city, as well as we have Country Pines and we have Verona McMullen Manor. In addition, we have 286 units of affordable housing in market. And when we speak of affordable housing, we're talking about 80% or less of CMHC average market rents. In addition to providing bricks and mortar housing units, we also assist the city in their administration of 2 very key housing programs. The first being the rent supplement administration. And so rent supplement units are where tenants on the RGI wait list are placed with private landlords that the city has an agreement with. So the tenant has the lease, for example, with the private landlord, and we administer the program and we provide the subsidy of that unit to the landlord directly. So we work with probably 10 rent supplement private landlords in the city, and there's 478 units in that program. The city was very instrumental in creating a pilot, the first in the province, called the Portable Housing Benefit. And this is a unique program in that the subsidy is given to the tenant or applicant to go out and find their own housing with a private landlord, and the benefit is tied to the tenant and not to a unit. So therefore, it gives the flexibility of the tenant to find a place to live on their own at their choice. And also it helps people that maybe were on the centralized wait list stay where they are, but they need to have assistance with rent. So we have 85 units of a portable housing benefit. One of the things I want to stress here, and I put 0 supportive housing. I want to make it clear that KFHC doesn't provide supportive housing. We are strictly a social housing provider, we have affordable, and we have market. So overall, we're very busy. We have over 2,000 units of housing that we're looking at in the city of Kingston. Next, please. So one of the other things that, as you saw from our strategic plan, is we're the biggest developer of affordable housing in Kingston. Over the last 9 years, we've done 8 developments, some of them small scale at about 150 units. And all of our new developments are what we call mixed income. And this is where we believe that we do not want to have segregated tenancies like we have at Rideau Heights. We want to ensure that we are reflecting the community. So our apartment buildings are made up of RGI, affordable, and market. They're all built the same, they're all treated the same. And this is where we have moved for all of our developments, the 8 that we've done. We're really excited to increase affordable housing as there's such a need in the Kingston community. And if anybody's been past 27 Wright Crescent, this is just down from the Y. We have a 40-unit apartment building that's going up. And 13 of those units are going to be affordable and 10 are going to be rent geared to income. And we have 17 market. Why we have to have market units in our developments is for many reasons. We want to ensure true reflection of the community, mixed income, but we often receive wonderful funding grants through the city and the province in order to build, but we do not get all of the funding in what's to complete the construction, all the required. So what we end up doing is we take on mortgages to finance the construction. And for that, we need to pay these mortgages. So it's the rent revenue that's generated from our market units that allows us to pay these mortgages. We are once again partnering with the city, and we have 2 future developments in the planning stages. And with over 101 units in construction in the next 2 years. And I can tell you 60 units will be affordable and RGI, and some of them at 65% average market rent. Next, please. One of the things I just thought was very valuable for the committee to know about is we've all been impacted by the pandemic. And for KFHC, we've had to adjust and adapt very quickly. KFHC is an essential service. And one of the things I decided when the announcement occurred is we needed to be here for our tenants. We're an essential service. We house vulnerable people. So we adapted to have safety measures and guidelines, but with the focus on supporting our tenants. So we did maintenance a little bit differently. We decreased the traffic into the office, but we were always there, and we have 24-hour on-call to ensure that we were there for our tenants. The city, I have to say, came through and have been extremely supportive, and were able to provide us with some funding to enhance our internal support services. When I say support services, it's housing supports to keep people housed in their units and to abide by their lease. So what that allowed us to do is to have 2 full-time staff. But when you think about it, for 1,600 units, it was such a great resource that we were able to have. During the pandemic, a rent freeze occurred. And what that meant is we instantly received a reduction in revenue because we could not increase it. At the same time, you can imagine how the expenditures had increased drastically. The province provides some assistance for our funding, 30%, where it's the city who pays 70% of the funding for us. The province benchmarks the funding. Last year, for this year, we received a reduction in the amount of almost 0.5% that could go towards maintenance and administration. In order to keep people housed, the province also set a moratorium on evictions. And when this happened, it limited KFHC's ability to have different tools on which to engage tenants and to ensure good neighbors and safe communities. Next, please. It's been very tragic to see some of the impact on that pandemic has had on our tenants. We house some of the most vulnerable tenants in the city. There has been a drastic increase in tenant suicide, drug overdoses. We have one building, a small building, very close to the main office here. In a year and a half, we've had 8 deaths, which is very tragic. We have seen an increase in aggression and antisocial behavior between tenants, with the public, and also towards staff, which has been very concerning. And the living conditions of the tenants has seemed to have decreased. The tenants during the pandemic stopped paying rent. And I can tell you the majority of the tenants were impacted due to employment being withdrawn, because about 75% of our tenants are on OW and ODSP. And they were receiving extra funds, but at the same time, the tenants stopped paying rent, which resulted in a decrease in revenue for KFHC, at the same time, an increase in rent arrears. Like most of us, the tenants felt for their concern for their health and well-being, so they limited maintenance in our pest control company to be into the units. So what has happened there's been an increase in pest infestation, as well as some greater damage has been done to the units. So what has happened as a result, we've got a backlog of maintenance orders. And as we've moved through the phases of reopening, tenants have become more comfortable to have their maintenance issues addressed. Therefore, we have this large backlog of work orders. We have to prioritize the work orders according to need. And so for some tenants, their need might be pushed back, and I assume that's causing them much frustration. And we're trying to work as quickly towards them as we can. For KFHC, we're also an employer. So during the pandemic, we wanted to ensure that we're supporting our tenants, but at the same time, we needed to help support our staff and their family and childcare needs. Next, please. So in saying all of that, that was the pandemic, and we still are facing some of those issues. But I wanted to give a sort of a reality check as to where KFHC is today and some of the concerns and challenges that we're facing. For KFHC, we try to house our tenants as long as possible. We have eviction prevention measures in place because our goal is to keep people housed. And often the tenants have many issues. They're vulnerable, and we want to keep them with us as long as possible and stabilize tenancies. So often KFHC receives little recognition or support for how we're operating to keep people housed with us. As I mentioned before, we're seeing an increase in the complexity of tenant need, mental health, addictions, aggression, violence, and the lack of daily living skills and aging in place. So these are some of the things that we're dealing with on a daily basis. One of the things that seems to be a recurring issue for KFHC is tenants look to us, and we're the landlord, we're not a social service, to deal with their many non-landlord issues. For example, we get several calls a day about, somebody said something that on Facebook and I don't agree with it, or somebody called my dog a name. So tenants often reach out to KFHC for issues that aren't related to their tenancy. For KFHC, we work in collaboration with any kind of social service, any agency to get supports for our tenants. But at the same time, we're a landlord, we need to maintain confidentiality. There's a lack of services and mental health services that tenants are receiving. Throughout the years, KFHC has done a wonderful job, I think. We're sort of holding the gap. We are trying to maintain these tenancies. And often when people receive housing with KFHC, they often feel they're housed, the issues go away, and that's not the case. And as you know, when KFHC was established and early 1990s, late 1990s, group homes and institutions were eliminated across the province, and senior apartment buildings were mandated to become adult. And this provided units for housing to move people out of these group homes and institutions. So what has happened? They've come to KFHC with or without supports that have been withdrawn over the years. And secondly, all services are voluntary. So you can imagine when a tenant doesn't feel like they need to be meeting a counselor, having support, and they stop any kind of involvement, that it impacts their living, but not only their living, but also everybody in the building and the community. So for KFHC, as I mentioned, we're an employer. We're continuing to monitor safety issues of the staff. We provide staff debriefing, and we also provide training to the staff on how to interact with our tenants. One of the things that we've recently done over the last 2 years is all staff are trained in mental health first aid. Next, please. For KFHC, I thought I'd just give you a little bit of information. Our RGI units that's where our budget comes from, our subsidy. Our affordable housing, we pay for all of our maintenance and all of that out of the rents that we collect, so it's separate. So for RGI maintenance and capital improvements for a year, we basically have about $2,000 per unit, which is not much given this day with the increasing expenditures and funding decreasing. I previously mentioned that over 75% of our tenants are on Ontario Works or ODSB. And in the province, this is highest in any other local housing corporation. And why I bring this forward, it just indicates the need in the Kingston and Frontenac County, the needs of our tenants if we have 75% who are on assistance. There's a couple things I want to talk about, not specifically to KFHC, but I'm concerned as a housing provider as well as for the housing and homeless sector. We're facing many challenges in order to obtain outside maintenance contractors or bids for capital renovations, that general contractors do not want to do work in the social service and housing provider industry. It's much more difficult dealing with tenants' living conditions. So what we're seeing is a reduction in supports in the maintenance field. We're also seeing that the private landlords and developers are not interested in affordable housing. And this concerns KFHC because we feel more people need to be offering affordable housing. We're one of the largest affordable housing providers. We're the largest provider of social housing. And we know about some of the private landlords that are no longer going to be involved in the rent supplement program. And some of this is due to the costs related to tenant behavior, arrears, and damages. So that's a concern for KFHC for this sector. The other concern is the difficulty is to recruit and maintain staff in the housing and homeless sector, and organizations across the city are facing this. And this is an issue because we are seeing the aging staff population. Next, please. So for me, it's really, I've done a presentation, I've given you lots of words, but I feel pictures say it better. So for KFHC, we want to help our tenants. We want to keep them housed. They have vulnerabilities. They have disabilities. At the same time, KFHC, we're limited with our resources and what we can do. On the picture on the left, this is just a picture of the kitchen area of a unit. The whole unit is like this. We have about 50 of these at any given time out of the 1,200 RGI units. This unit is infested with cockroaches and with bed bugs. We have worked with this tenant. We have tried many things. We have been able to get a discretionary benefit in which to have this unit cleaned out. Company came in, did half of it. Staff become very sick from cleaning this out and have refused to go back in. So when you're looking at this unit, it's not a landlord issue in that we didn't cause all of this to be there. We have very limited ability in which to do something about it. Support services have offered and tenant has refused. At the same time, this unit is infesting a large apartment building. So what are our options? As a landlord, we have very little, but to start the eviction process. At the same time, we're really concerned that nobody should be living in that situation. But the question is, whose responsibility is it? I know it's something that we're all grappling with in the housing sector and social services. How do we address this? And I'm not looking for answers, but if you do have them, I would really appreciate it. The picture on the right-hand side, this is just showing the living style of tenants, how dirty it is, but all along there, that's not dirt, that's actually cockroaches. For KFHC, we have an extensive pest management system. We have a wonderful pest control company, but treating in these kind of situations is not effective. It cannot affect the bugs. It doesn't work. The treatments don't work. But what happens is it causes the infestation to cross through the walls into other units. Next, please. The picture on the top is just showing how the cockroaches are leaving a unit and are actually in the hallway. And just so you know, we do treat hallways, garbage areas, common rooms, all of that. The picture on the bottom, we have many family units, and they have backyards and front yards. And we're dealing with rodent infestation. So we work with the tenants in order to clean up their backyards. Property standards gets involved, and it's a continual battle. One of the things I want to assure you is we're trying our best to help the tenants to deal with these issues. And we need to have the tenants engaged. And that for KFHC, we have about 10% of our tenant population that struggle with issues like these. So, sometimes we would have maybe 120 units that we're working with. And keep in mind, we have 28 full-time staff. Next, please. For me, this is a picture. It's a bathroom. It's a tub, and you'll see the wall against the tub. And you will see that there's a fungus growing there. And this picture says a lot to me because we received this picture from a tenant through email with a nasty note saying, what is housing going to do about this? So I just want to reassure you that as housing, we can support the tenant, This is not black mold. This is actually the housekeeping and lifestyle of this tenant. So we sent an email stating, maybe a suggestion could be that you mop the bathroom floor and maybe use some Javex. But again, we are bombarded by tenants who feel that we need to address all of their issues, and we're there to support them. They're vulnerable. We're willing to help them. We're willing to bring in other resources. But at the same time, I just want to show you some of the complexities and challenges and issues that KFHC faces on a daily basis. Next, please. This was on TV. This is 381 Bagot. This is the largest housing, social housing in Kingston, 104 units, located street health located right beside us. We're dealing daily with people breaking into the building, living in our stairwells. We have a comprehensive approach to deal with this. The police, the fire department, addictions and mental health, home-based housing, ourselves. We have street health. We have involved a security firm, but for us, it's not a tenant issue. We feel for our tenants living in this building. We are doing all we can, but this is something where we know has to have a community approach. Next, please. So how does KFHC deal with all of this? Well, first of all, I just want to outline some of our approaches. As a landlord, we're governed by the Residential Tenancy Act, that both the tenant and KFHC, we have rights and responsibilities. And we want to assist our tenants in fulfilling their obligations and creating a home. At the same time, we have to ensure that all of our tenants are treated the same and that we're addressing all issues. I just want to reinforce, we're a social housing and affordable housing provider. We have market units. We're not funded as a social service, and it is not our mandate. However, we have identified the need, and we have very limited housing supports that we've created within. We are governed under the Housing Services Act to provide rent geared to income and to applicants who qualify. So for social housing tenants, we receive them off the centralized wait list, and we do not do any kind of checks, reference checks for these tenants. The only ones that we're able to do that is for our affordable and our market units. Next, please. As I mentioned, we have a backlog of maintenance. Right now, we have about 143 maintenance orders that are outstanding, and about 100 are just over 2 weeks old. We have to repair according to need as well as issue, which is determined by the maintenance department. And I feel for tenants who have issues, such as maybe cracked tiles or something, but if it's not a priority at this time, they're going to have to wait. And some of that has been due to the pandemic. We're often questioned, KFHC, about our waste removal system. The City of Kingston is our primary waste management service, and we augment that. We have our own garbage truck, which the city has helped us obtain, and we monitor every weekday all of our properties for illegal dumping. It's removed, and we do that on a daily basis. To give you an indication of the little over $1 million in maintenance a year, over 150,000 is spent on garbage removal alone, which is over and above what the city does. I mentioned we have a real comprehensive pest management system, but again, it's engaging the tenant and working on it together. Next, please. One of the things we're happy to have happen is, now that things are safe to reopen, is our Tenant Advisory Committee that reports to the board, so that's being reinstated. I've talked about our collaboration with other social services, emergency services. We have the highest number of calls in the city. So all partnerships, anybody willing to support our tenants in KFHC, we more than welcome. While I'm here, I want to just advocate to the city if we can still receive funding for the enhanced internal housing support. That additional staff has been so beneficial. Something that you may not know, that for KFHC, we have a formal partnership with Queen's University and St. Lawrence College. We do clinical placements of nurses, occupational therapy, and the students help by providing programming and assistance to our tenants. We're also involved in 3 research studies because there's very little research done on social housing. So if KFHC can help and we can learn, we are very willing to participate. Next slide, please. I probably took more than my allotted time, so thank you, Chair, for that. I appreciate that. And one of the things that I just request is that if anybody has concerns, please address them to me directly. And I listed my email there. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cousins-Brame. That was a very insightful and informative presentation. It was much appreciated. Thank you for that, as well as for your and your team's work over this time during the pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also like to request that a copy of the presentation be circulated to committee members following this, Elizabeth, if that's okay. And so following this presentation now, the committee will be able to speak. So as a reminder, the bylaw allows for 2 questions from each committee member, and committee only, not public. And if you do have additional questions, as Ms. Cousins-Brame had noted, you may contact her directly following the meeting. Okay, so I will now request from our committee if there are questions. Thank you, Councillor Doherty. I see you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It was very good. It was very insightful. I have asked this before, but I've just found it. I was so surprised when I heard the number. You mentioned the comprehensive pest control program, and I just wonder how much that costs a year. Like,
so currently we're spending over 100,000 a year, but it depends on the need. If we have major infestation, then the cost would go up. Last year alone, it was about 175,000. So if you take that and add it to the garbage and you look at our maintenance budget, you know, it's almost 1/3 of it is spent on garbage and pest management.
thanks for that. I also, being the councillor and being on the board, I have received a lot of phone calls and emails regarding some of the issues that have been highlighted lately. And I had one tenant who refused to have any kind of pest control spraying in there. She was very upset about that. And then I had another tenant calling because she has cockroaches. And so the other tenant who called about cockroaches had an interesting question. She asked, where's public health in this? And if people refuse to let the pest control companies in, does public health have a say, and can they help with it to ensure that the spraying is actually done in the building? And I got a question last night.
So public health does not deal with cockroaches or bed bugs. And same with lice. If you remember years ago, lice in school, you couldn't go to school, but now it's not considered a contagious disease. So nothing is done with public health in regards to cockroaches or to bed bugs. One of the things that we have available to us at last resort is the landlord-tenant board. We provide a notice that tenant needs to engage in order to eradicate the pests. The other thing is all of the treatments that are done. This is government regulated spraying that the company has to have and licenses. And there are guidelines that are circulated to the tenants, how they have to prepare the unit. And additionally, for example, if a tenant has any kind of health condition, it will outline how long they have to be out of the unit in order to return that it's safe. So we open common rooms. We try to help facilitate a location during the treatment process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Francesca, Ms. Creed, I did see your hand earlier, and then following you, I did see Councillor Neal. So we'll go in that order. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So in my past life, when I worked, I had an organizing business, and I sorted and helped people, some of whom were real hoarders and incredibly messy in their lifestyle. And so I know that the photographs which you showed are not necessarily an indication of an economic status, but are prevalent like throughout. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a mental issue as opposed from an economic one, although obviously the economic straits don't help. So I'm wondering, and I noticed that in our main menu, hoarding is on the agenda, and that's the first that I've seen it mentioned. So I'm wondering if more is going to be addressed on this dilemma.
We are part of, we participate in the hoarding coalition that is in the city. There's limited funding for that. It comes down to who is going to help the tenant clean it out. Whose responsibility is that? And what kind of companies are available? Who pays for it? But we have done in the past, KFHC has actually paid contractors, had the unit cleaned out, and within a very short time, it had reverted back to the same. So I agree with you in some aspects, it's a mental health sort of condition and issue, but how do we initially get it cleaned out? And how do we ensure that services stay in there and that the mental health issue is provided support? And that's sort of our challenge today.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Creed.
Thanks.
Councillor Neal, please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I had too many questions, but I appreciate that you addressed a couple of them. You utilize addictions and mental health as a working partner in issues, and also Queens, and I would assume St. Lawrence people have placements to help some of those social service needs. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
And I'm hoping that won't be counted as a question. I have two more. First of all, is it my understanding that the RGI number has remained pretty consistent over the last decade or so? And if that's the case, have we ever used any of the supplemental funding that the city provides? And I think that's a great program in order to make some of those 80% affordable units actually affordable to people on the waiting list.
So what has happened is for the, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Ruth because Ruth is there, is for KFHC, the 1,200 units that we have of rent geared to income is consistent. At the download of the housing to the municipalities, City of Kingston, Frontenac County had to maintain 2003 units of RGI, and that has been maintained. In looking at the centralized wait list for people on the list waiting for social housing or rent geared to income or assistance. I can tell you, since I joined housing in November 2010, it's maintained that 1,200 seems to be consistent. And of course, we have in that 1,200, there is a huge demand for 1 bedrooms. And that's why KFHC, when we've been building our affordable, we're gearing it to that. So affordable housing, like I mentioned before, is 80%. Some of the new housing affordable that KFHC is looking to build and construct is averaging about 65% of market rent.
I appreciate that. The RGI units then that we're counting in the builds, such as Wright Crescent and previously on Brock, those are actually reallocations of existing RGI units. Those aren't new affordable units. Is that accurate?
Yes. So the several years ago, KFHC, we had to, due to the condition of 80 daily, it was 30 RGI townhouses, due to not only the condition, maintenance, construction wise, but also social issues. We demolitioned the 30 units as part of the Rideau Heights regeneration plan. And we have put back those 30 units. And that has happened in our new builds at 40 Cliff, 645 Brock Street, and 10 of them at 27 Wright. The other thing that we have done is we have taken up 20 of our RGI units and we've converted them to market. And all of that subsidy that would be going to those 20 RGI units has gone into assisting in the portable housing benefit. So what we've been able to do, instead of housing 20 people in RGI, we're helping 85. So we're trying to use our subsidy to house more and support more people. At the same time, I know 1316 Princess Street is in the planning stage and we're moving forward. There's going to be an additional 10 RGI units there, which will be over and above the requirement. And some affordable housing that's at 65%, as well as 80%. So really getting to affordable rents for people.
Thank you. And I think I've squeezed my 2 questions into 3 or 4. I appreciate that. Thank you. And thanks to you. I saw Ruth kind of flash across my screen. Is there anything she wanted to add?
Yeah, sorry, and to you, Madam Chair, I just wanted to add to Marilyn's response, which was great. I just wanted to remind members of the committee that we are very aware that the definition of affordable housing is at 80% average markets, given our current markets, and where we are is not necessarily affordable for everybody. And that's why we are moving forward with many projects where we look at 60% average markets or even deeper affordable housing. And I know council approved a few projects actually 2 nights ago, which is really the way forward. So I know that 80% for many people will be, still, quite a bit of money. But again, that is really trying to find the right balance between all the different housing projects. And I guess the other thing, just to kind of loop back to your question, Councillor Neal, is for your portable housing benefit question and the 80%. Again, the portable housing benefit is part of the 2003 social housing kind of units that we need to deliver under the Housing Services Act. And there could be a situation where somebody might be housed in a market unit or an 80% average market unit at KFHC and would also be on the housing wait list and then would be able to use that portable housing benefit. But it really is, again, is a tool for members of the public to either stay where they are, and no, Meredith can comment on this, but we have definitely seen with the first like 88 affordable housing benefits that we have launched that there is a lot of evidence that people are kind of staying housed where they are and now are moving from potentially paying 50 or 60 or 70% of their income towards their rent to actually now going to that 30%. So I hope that I just wanted to add that to the
Yeah, thank you. I think that's an excellent program, and like all great programs, you just need more money in it. So thank you very much.
Ms. McCarty, please go ahead.
Just a question, Mary Lynn. I thank you for your presentation. Is there a plan with the new housing where you identify, because you've identified that there's definitely a lack of skills in some of your tenants. Is there a plan to maybe in the future provide some type of supportive housing to those individuals?
I can say right now is not our plan to provide supportive housing. That would be something that, we would have to go before the board. And that would be something that, we have the supportive housing in the city. So that would be something that the city would be looking at.
And are you connected with any of the organizations that you regularly that you try to connect these individuals with?
So one of the things I need to reinforce is we're the landlord. So as a landlord, you have very limited ability in which to, let's say, make referrals, confidentiality. It's we find ourselves, we try to do as much as possible assisting tenants to make self-referrals, getting their permission to make referrals. But at the same time, we're very limited because we have a contractual relationship. We are the landlord.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Nordergraf, I did see your hand if you wanted to go.
Sorry, I will not chime in all the time, but through you, Madam Chair, it's an excellent question, Michelle, because I think this is obviously the key thing that's coming up in many of our conversations. It really is that need to have that partnership between all the different service providers. And I think the point that was made earlier about the kind of the closure of some of the community institutions really has impacted kind of the way to support people. I wanted to just point out that just for a bit of the reality of it, even if we would be in the position to really move towards supportive housing, if you compare it with, for instance, an actual supportive housing provider such as AMHS or others in our community, you would look at a caseload of a certain amount of people in units, you would almost have to double. You would have to add another 30 staff as case managers to really become those support services for tenants. So it really will be an ongoing kind of task as a community of housing, social services, and health providers to work together to come up with a way of supporting people. I think the start, and we launched that last year with KFHC of the supportive services and have dedicated staff above and beyond the role of the landlord to actually prevent some issues from becoming more challenging has really paid off. But again, that was a relatively small investment of $110,000 that was used for 2 staff. Again, supporting 1,200 units. So it is a really important conversation, and it really again goes back to who is able to do what within our community and how can we support. And the last thing I'll say, because I know I can go on forever, but the last thing that I think will be really important as well is, for instance, in our housing and social services departments, we are obviously also delivering the Ontario Works program. And we have case managers that are working with a lot of the clients that are housed within our social housing system or are on the wait list. So I think there's also opportunities again to look at how can we longer term work together and potentially have staff come and work from a common room in one of the housing projects and support staff, our clients there. So it's not impossible, but we just have to really look at different ways of working together between the different agencies.
Thank you, Ruth, for that explanation.
Thank you. Ms. White, I see your hand as well. If you would like to go ahead.
Hi, really good presentation, a lot of good information. Kind of felt a little bit concerned at one point. It sounded like you were blaming all the tenants for everything, and then you were presenting with all the problems that you have with no real solutions. But I feel if the board itself was able to step back, it has the solutions there. You just need to come together a little bit better to create something a little bit more concrete. Obviously, mental health will always be an issue, but yes, you are a landlord, but you are also hoping to make tenants more comfortable, and you have the resources. You know, from the university, from all of the other city requirements, you are able to, I think, come together as a board, look at the whole situation in all of the tenancies, and actually build something a little bit more concrete, so that if somebody has a situation, your staff has a list that they can make a phone call or direct them to a place that they can go. I think it just needs to be a little bit more structured. I also received emails from Tenant and Bridget actually with me to let me know some information, but they are still quite, what's the word, apprehensive about follow through. I also heard information in regards to people that are coming forward with complaints that they are starting to be harassed by management, which doesn't impress me one little bit. I hope this is not the case, and I hope it does stop. So my question actually will be is, when will your board get together and actually review everything more solidly and come up with a plan so that the public can see that things will change?
Okay. I have to say that I respectfully hear you. I know there's tenants that appear to have some concerns and issues. I can confidently say that staff are not, or management are harassing tenants. We have a complaint line. I can tell you that very little complaints are filed. I can let you know that the board of directors receives ongoing reports of complaints, of key performance indicators on a monthly basis, and that we're working to deal with all our tenants, their vulnerabilities, and we're addressing their needs. At the same time, we're limited as a landlord, and our involvement, the only thing that we have is a contractual agreement with the tenant and ourselves. Not only do we have to meet the need of each tenant, but all tenants. And that's something that we strive to do. As far as the board, they have strong governance and they have strong oversight of KFHC.
Madam Chair, I wonder if I might just add something as the spokesperson for the board.
Yes, please do.
The board has had one meeting and has a second special meeting scheduled to look at all of the concerns that have come to light over the last number of weeks, and to scrutinize what activities and programs and measures the corporation has in place to ensure that we are treating tenants respectfully and that we are putting them in a position where they can live in a home in our environment. We have identified a number of different actions that we intend to take in the next while. That includes things like getting our tenant advisory council, which was on hiatus, back in place with a reporting relationship to the board, and a few other measures like that. We do have a very significant level of accountability from Mary Lynn and the team. We get a report each month of all of the maintenance requests that have come through and the status of them being completed. We have a similar kind of report coming to us around complaints. And I feel that we do have strong governance and oversight of the work that's being done by the team at Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation.
Thank you for the information, Denise. I'm glad to hear that there is actually going to be a special meeting. I hope that the tenants are able to actually see the results publicly so that they know themselves what is happening without having to get a hold of other people to speak on their behalf. I hope it can move forward because this is obviously a big, huge situation, and I hope other community organizations will reach out and we can all work together to make that, well, Bagot, for example, a better area to live in. So I'm hoping too that people will also be able to have a way of connecting to people that have complaints, you know, maybe yourself, Denise, or somebody who they can feel comfortable enough to present their issues. But I'm glad to hear that there is going to be a board meeting, and I look forward to hearing that things are going to progress and move forward. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Was there anyone else from the committee who had questions? Ms. Creed.
This isn't a question. Andy, with due respect, I think that you have put Mary Lynn in a hard position, and it's just not that simple, you know, for everyone to come together and solve this. I think you sort of put her between a rock and a hard place. And from her presentation, I really feel that she and her staff are doing everything that they can do given the problems at this point. So let's hope for all our sakes that things improve, but it is what it is. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Creed, for that. And Councillor Neal, I saw your hand go up again.
There
You're
we go.
muted.
Just to ask a quick question of Ms. Cummings. I was formerly on the board too many years ago, but if I recall correctly, they aren't, your meetings are open to the public, but they aren't publicly broadcast the way we do in Zoom. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Meetings that have an open agenda are open to members of the public if they register with us in advance. We do not broadcast on Zoom. We do also have closed and in-camera meetings as required by our policies.
Understandably. And your minutes, I know, come to the city, but when do they become public documents?
I don't actually know the answer to that question, but I'm imagining that the clerk's office does.
So could a clerk, Elizabeth or Julia, address that?
I can maybe jump in. Our board minutes are published every year. Our board minutes have to be ratified by the shareholder, and that is done at the annual general meeting of the shareholder that happens in June. So once they're ratified, then they're posted on the website. Also the agenda the meeting notification is posted on the city website for KFHC of
Okay.
upcoming meetings.
Yeah, I'm so used to, and the clerks can correct me if I'm wrong, but typically minutes go to the board to be confirmed.
Yes.
And then they're shared with the city as an approved minutes for our information. And this would be the only board I'm aware of that doesn't follow that common practice of having the board ratify the last board meeting minutes and then making it public.
So the board approves the minutes at each meeting for the previous minutes. Yes.
They do, okay.
Yes.
Because I was getting the idea that it's only at year-end general meeting,
No,
but that's
then
not the case.
the board approves them. The shareholder ratifies them at the AGM.
Okay, so when do they become public? After only when it goes through the AGM process?
So they're public after the board has approved them. Yes, they can be shared, but the shareholder also has to ratify them at the AGM.
Okay, so I'm sorry, this question is becoming far too long, I know. But the whole idea then is if I'm a member of the public and the board has ratified the previous board meeting, would those minutes be available on your website?
Yes, to the public. They could be,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, that's a really
Short answer is yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, I don't see any other hands up from my committee. So I will just note at one point, Ms. Cousins-Braham, you had identified, you'd mentioned that it's often very thankless to do this type of work. And we're very clear that you do have zero supportive housing. So I know it can be disheartening, especially to be misunderstood in the position of landlord and how far you can go. And so just to take an opportunity for myself personally to say thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, yours and your team, and as well to your board for the work and the passion. It takes a lot of passion and a lot of heart to do this day in and day out, for that to be your life and what you breathe as your daily work. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will end it by asking Ms. Fawcett again if we can have that presentation. I thought it was very insightful. If that can please be sent around to all of the committee members again, so so we continue to deal in the facts and details. That would be great. Okay, so we will move forward now. The next item on the list is briefings. There are no briefings for this meeting. And then we will move into business items. So we do have 2 business items. And I will just, again, following each business item, I will call on any committee members who wish to ask a question or make a comment. Following that, if there are any members of the public who are present, then each member of the public can speak up to 5 minutes. And all questions will be answered at the end of the public questions and comments section of each business item. So for the business items, they are attached for information purposes only, so there are not any motions from them. So the first was the homelessness system review, final recommendations, and implementation plan. And I'm not sure, I will call on Ms. Dordegraaf. Was there any discussion that you wanted to have or anything you wanted to say regarding that? I know that it was attached for information for us to read through, but in case.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. I will actually ask my colleague, Mr. Grange, to speak to this. We obviously have had a chance to bring this to the committee a few times with a draft report in June and also a broader presentation in August. So we just wanted to again bring this final or most final overview of the community kind of recommendations that we've worked on for this committee to have an opportunity to respond to. And I will ask Mr. Grange if there's anything else that he would like to add.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, my video doesn't seem to be coming on. There it goes. So thank you very much. So yeah, just to add to what Ms. Nordograf had mentioned is, yes, we have come forward to the committee on numerous occasions. This will be the 4th or 5th time actually that we've come forward with information regarding the homelessness system review, dating back to last September, where we notified the committee of the process, and then bringing forward draft recommendations on 2 occasions for review. And then at the special meeting in August, we had our org code, our consultant who is working on the quantitative analysis and that final piece of the recommendation puzzle to provide a special presentation to the committee. So if we look at the report is basically just outlining that. It's a short, concise report with that information. So it outlines the work completed to date, which we've touched on. And really the reason for bringing this report forward is to just state and show that we have finalized what we're calling the Homelessness System Action Plan, which outlines over 60 recommendations and actions targeted towards the city under its purview as service manager, and what we can work towards improving under our community housing and prevention initiative funding, as well as community and service provider actions, addressing and encouraging partnerships to create a more integrated system of care. So with that, I will state actually that the next steps relating in the process, although the system action plan has been finalized, we are still working with org code on the creation of the request for proposal documents, which are scheduled to go out in late September, early August, pending approval from council. And we'll be taking a recommendation report to council, hopefully at the end of September, getting their approval to the implementation plan and the action plan as presented. Following the submissions of the request for proposals, we will then form an evaluation committee consisting of internal city staff, external partners within the city, as well as sector experts, to ensure that we have a really sound and appropriate mix of expertise around the table to evaluate those submissions. And following that, there'd be the rollout of the new program, of the new system in the new year. Understanding that there'll have to be an allowance or a period of time to potentially, if there's new partners around the table, to provide training, transition, and proper communication to the public to advise them as to who is providing what service. So that's really an overview of the document. And with that, I guess we turn it back to you, Madam Chair, and see if there are any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the committee? Councillor Neal, I could see it before you put your hand up. In your eyes, give it away. So we have Councillor.
I'm always looking to, because I don't want to jump the queue if there's other people with questions. If there are hands that go up,
I'll defer to first, and Mr. Clark will speak after you.
Excellent, thank you. A couple of questions. The numbers that you show for the utilization rates for the shelters, I'm just curious because they have declined. Are those based on the lower capacity numbers that is the COVID reality, or are those based on the original non-COVID larger numbers? Is that a logical question? I'm not sure if it is. So.
Through you, and thanks for that question, Councillor Neal. So I'm not sure, like, I know there's a lot of numbers that we've been used, but I think kind of on a general level, what I can speak to, and my colleagues can add to that, is we are definitely, and I think that is the complexity and reality that we are in. We are still in the pandemic, and we're still we're still working through some of the infection prevention control requirements. So prior to the pandemic, we were providing 69 beds between the homeless housing in From the Cold, Lily's Place, and the youth shelter. During the pandemic, we obviously have had to reduce the capacity in the kind of those 69 regular shelter beds. And we added, although not considered as a shelter, but we did add the integrated care hub as another service within the community. So at this point, we're obviously not back at the 69 beds that we were providing prior to the pandemic. Again, our procurement process and kind of next steps will also involve a conversation around hopefully bringing back a dedicated women's shelter. And so the number of beds will definitely, I think, and kind of where we land moving forward, we don't have a set number or a set target at this point. It also really will have to be a back and forth between kind of where we are now and what the providers are able to provide. Also, and I know this is not part of the homelessness system per se, but it's very closely aligned, and we have identified that as well in the recommendation matrix, is the availability of more transitional and supportive solutions. Because again, what we would really like to see is ideally an ability for people to move from a shelter bed faster into a housing solution. So I know it's maybe not a very clear-cut answer, but we are definitely at this point kind of in a bit of an unknown of where we will land in number of beds moving forward.
So the utilization rates you're dealing with a former drama teacher, not a mathematician, so if you'll bear with me. The 30% utilization rate, is that based on the 9-bed capacity that happens, or is that based on the 15 or the original capacity pre-COVID?
If I might, through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Neal, the stats are somewhat mixed. So when we looked at a longitudinal study of shelter utilization rates, it can be a little confusing in that prior to 2019, those numbers were based on the 69 beds. And then the numbers from 2019 onwards, which are not necessarily clearly indicated. So the 30% utilization was during COVID. We did see one of our largest drops in individuals utilizing shelters last summer and last fall and winter. We had very low shelter utilization rates at that point in time. So it depends month by month what those shelter numbers actually are, and then they're averaged out to show what the average utilization is.
And this kind of, I was going to ask this question later, but with that large reduction, has there been a similar reduction in the funding for shelters? So we're continuing to pay pre-COVID prices when in fact the COVID numbers are greatly reduced in the shelter.
Well, if I might explain that, it's an economy of scale type of proposition. So in reality, when you're working in a shelter setting, you have to keep the safety of your shelter staff and those individuals staying there as much as possible. So if you staff your shelter double staffed, whether there's 9 or 20 people in there, you have to continue staffing at least 2 individuals to ensure safety for clients and shelter staff. So there's been little ability to actually decrease the funding for shelters. And also they've had a lot of added expenses, such as, recreating spaces for managing COVID, for cleaning, for PPE, for a host of other items. So at that point in time, no, there's been no reduction to the shelters.
And is the youth shelter funded under the same as, I'm sorry, I've lost my place here on my little phone. It's now approaching $2 million. Is the youth shelter also managed by the same people as In From the Cold, or is that a separate entity?
Completely separate entity. So the Kingston Youth
Okay.
Shelter is run by the Kingston Youth Shelter and their ED and board of directors, and In From the Cold is run by In From the Cold and their executive director and their board of directors.
Thank you. I should have known that. In future, after Princess Albert Street is developed, will we still be funding the youth shelter system that now exists?
Thank you. I will try to respond to those questions, Councillor Neal. So, and maybe just to mention a little bit about the cost and COVID. We are seeing definitely a few of the different programs, and we're seeing some surplus with our partners through our CHIPI or our provincial funds, because there are, and I think we mentioned actually, CEO Cousins Frame spoke about that with KFHC as well. There's definitely some staffing challenges and the inability to have the full staffing complement on board for the variety of the homelessness services. So not just the shelter, but also, for instance, the prevention, diversion, housing first services. So we are definitely looking at a bit of a surplus. And I just wanted to add that piece. The question regarding 484 Albert and One Roof and the Youth Hub. So at this point, ultimately, the youth system or the youth homelessness system, we obviously would like to see, and we're working really closely with the United Way, because the United Way, who is also part of the system and is providing the federal Reaching Home funding to support the homelessness system in our community, and have really been a leader in the youth homelessness kind of area. Between us as a city and the United Way, we are working, or we will be working towards a youth homelessness kind of procurement approach as well. We just wanted to take that separate from the adult sector, because we think that those two are we really want to kind of look at that closer. So with 484 at this point, it's being developed as a supportive and transitional housing project. The youth shelter is part of that, just like many other partners. And at this point, we see the need to continue to have a separate emergency shelter that will support youth. 5 years or 10 years from now, time will tell what the needs will be in the system. But if we're looking right now at our by name list and how many youth we know are on that list, and how many youth potentially are not on the list that may need to be on the list, we really see the need for those two kind of pieces separate, but also working together. So again, similar to my previous comments, for instance, having more transitional options in our community might allow youth to only have to stay in the shelter for a short time and then be able to move to a more middle to long-term solution. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Neal.
It does indeed. I have a couple more questions, but they may get asked by other members of the committee. So I'll return at the end after other people have spoken.
I believe, Mr. Clark, you had something.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of comments. One sort of general and two or three a little more specific. I guess that when we started on this journey way back when, one of the things that I understood, perhaps incorrectly, was that part of the part of the objective of doing a systems review was to look at the system as it sat and end up with coming out with a system that was somewhat different, and perhaps the priorities were different. So I guess I somehow expected the priorities of the systems review to be more clearly enunciated. Frankly, in some ways, when I first read the report, my first reaction, my first impression was, wow, everything's important, which unfortunately usually means that nothing is important. So I had expected some sort of a clear indication of sort of where the RFP process might be going. I really, I was somewhat disappointed. Again, a comment. I was happy to see the focus on transitional supportive housing. When we look at the repeat use of services, for instance, and clearly from what we've heard this afternoon, there is a need for that type of service, and I would suggest that unfortunately it's probably more of a need than when we started on this 10-year journey 7 years ago. And I take exception to one thing that Ruth just said. I would suggest to you that the transitional housing isn't part of the shelter system, but I would think that it's certainly part of the homelessness system. And it's, if you will, to me, the next step on on that transition between being on the street and being independently housed. I was also glad to hear Ruth's clarification of the objective of trying to end up with a separate women's shelter. Because again, as I read the action item, I would have hoped that on paper it would have been somewhat more robust, if you will. I think the review and the things that we've heard from a number of people have pointed to the need for a separate women's shelter. And while I would hope that the RFP process would provide that result, I would also hope that if it does not, that the city is committed to working with community groups to find a solution other than training staff and a separate door, which to me are completely unacceptable. And my fourth comment, and then I'll turn the mic back and be quiet. What disappointed me the most with the report was that it seems to perpetuate what I will call the manufactured narrative of high shelter rates in Kingston compared with other communities. I had the opportunity, unfortunately, I wasn't at the last meeting, but I had the opportunity to look at the YouTube presentation that was done, and I would agree with Councillor Neal that when I saw the ICH being lumped into the shelter costs, I too had heartburn. As a matter of fact, perhaps a little more than that heartburn. So, but one of the things that really disturbs me is that frankly, it's not surprising that when you look at Kingston's 2021 shelter rates, and you compare them with other municipalities' 2018 rates, we will be higher. Frankly, the past 19 months have been an extraordinary period. And I would think that in 5 years, when people are comparing things, there will always be an asterisk. after that, next to this period, because it will be universally accepted. It was such an unusual period. So I really question how this can be used as a comparator at all, unless it's being created as some sort of a wedge to move funding somewhere else. But that clearly, to me is not very clear. Madam Chair, those are my comments. I turn the microphone back to you.
Thank you. And I see Ms. Nordergraff is ready to respond.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Thanks for those comments. I will speak to a few of them and probably have my team kind of jump in as well. So first of all, I think, again, with Mr. Grange's introduction, we recognize that there is that as a service manager and as, you know, funded to kind of focus on housing and homelessness, we definitely have there's a much broader conversation around, you know, collaboration and needs to have other players participate as well to really address items. So and that's been I will be quite frank, I think over the last year, kind of going through this review while we're also working through a pandemic, really trying to kind of understand where we as a city and as a service manager and as a funder can say, okay, this is where we can make a difference, and this is how we can use our funding, and this is where we as a community really need to come up with some solutions. Has been is definitely not a very clear. There's not a very clear line on where things start and end. The comments around transitional housing, I think as a city we have stepped up and have created new partnerships to address the need for transitional housing, and we will continue to do so. I think, again, looking at our funding envelope and what does and does not fit within our provincial funding and how we distribute that is something that we really need to be mindful of. So I guess that's kind of what I wanted to share about that comment. And I hear you, like there's so much work to do. We have over 60 different action items, and we do have to really identify what we can do now and what we can do later, and who will be able to do some of that. So the RFP process, and I will have Mr. Grange or Ms. Boris kind of speak to that, will definitely allow to look at what is who is out there and who is willing to provide those services. Because again, that really goes back to who in the community is willing and able to potentially be a new partner in the system or pick up some of the pieces of providing the services. I will, we also have, and to your point regarding the comparators and kind of other communities, again, I will have, I think Mitch and Joanne speak to that. We also do have Tracy, I believe, on the call from ORCode. So we have brought those comments back as well to make sure that we're comparing the rights or comparing between COVID and pre-COVID. But I will pass kind of those comments over to my colleagues as well.
If I might, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your comments, Peter. Yeah, there's a lot of information there. Looking at the 60 different recommendations, it can be a little overwhelming to make the determination as to where the funds need to be spent. But in reality, we have pretty clear guidelines around our CHIPPY funding and what we can and cannot spend those on. I should also mention that for those who aren't aware, ORCode was engaged in the city's original CHIPPY funding service I guess you would call it. At that time, it wasn't a service review because there were no services, but they were key in establishing the Housing First program and the shelter system and those pieces in 2013, 2014. So what they really attempted to do so that we have a longitudinal look at what has happened since the system's been in place. I think we might have been a little remiss, and I know there's been a lot of comments about the fact that if we just looked at the last couple of years, but the reality is the system has now been in place for about 7 years, and we really need a clear understanding of where the points in time where it's worked really well are, what the pressure points have been along the system's longevity, and how we can ensure that we're meeting any of the gaps that we've determined that we might be experiencing over the last few years. So no doubt that the last couple of years will go down as a bit of an anomaly for future service reviews. But in reality, we've got some great data about when the system was functioning at its optimal level, which I think is really going to assist us as we put out the RFPs and create the template for our organizations to provide the supports that are needed. You won't see a whole lot change in the RFP process in reality, because as I mentioned, we are sort of bound as to what services we're able to fund through our chippy dollars. And we have a lot more flexibility with municipal. But for things like the Housing First program, prevention diversion, shelter systems, we do have a commitment to make and follow those. So the information provided there will hopefully assist us and assist the service providers that are looking at applying for those RFPs and making some decisions with us as to how to best serve the clients that need to be served moving forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And sorry, just to add, just to loop back on the RFP and then the service agreements, we want to make sure and we want to ensure basically what Joanna was just mentioning is that throughout the process, we want to ensure that what we have identified through our qualitative and quantitative analysis over the past year is captured within those RFP documents in our service agreements to ensure that any of the gaps that we've identified or anything that we want to and see in terms of process improvement going forward is clearly identified within those documents. So then there is that ability to hold providers accountable. So I just wanted to add that last remark. Thank you.
Thank you. So I see Councillor Doherty has just put up her hand, and then I also saw Frankie following Councillor Doherty's hand. So we'll go in that order.
I actually thought it was Frankie first, but okay.
Sorry, maybe it was. My screen had you first.
No, it is difficult with the screen. Okay, thanks.
We can speak to order.
I have a very kind of broad question, like, and that's like COVID threw us such a curveball, and we had to respond so quickly. Now we're going to organize these RFPs, and the question is how much flexibility can be built in there? Like this standing update report, what really jumped out to me are the family shelters had 115% capacity, and housing costs have gone up so much, and people sold rental properties to cash in on that market at the moment. So I guess I have, as needs arise unexpectedly, like who would have thought that COVID would lead to such a rise in house prices and people flipping homes? What kind of flexibility will be built in when we actually write the RFPs up to respond to needs as they arise?
Thank you. I will, through you, Madam Chair, I will try my best to respond to that. So absolutely, and I think that that's what we have been seeing with maybe a bit of or trying to balance, like being able to be nimble in the system and have a fluctuation of beds or availability as needed without having, empty shelters or surfaces that are not being utilized. So we definitely know that things are changing and will continue to change in the next few years with the impacts of the pandemic I was actually on a call yesterday where somebody mentioned that housing is the current or the next pandemic, which, you know, I can totally see. And again, to your points, in the standing report, we've identified some of the things that we're seeing. So I think and again, I will have both Ms. Boris and Mr. Grain speak to this because they're much more involved in this, but we definitely want to look at how do we work with providers that are interested in having, for instance, an ability to use, to have creative solutions to be able to expand if needed or reduce if needed. Again, within some sort of ability to have a base funding or a base kind of reality. I think the other real issue is the ability to hire and maintain qualified staff in the social services sector, which we also just heard. So we also need to keep that in mind. Like, how do we make sure that we have ample staff that are also not, that there's not too much staff turnover in the sector as well. So I know I'm kind of maybe not getting a very clear answer, but I think it's definitely something we're trying to balance within the RFP and within the negotiation, hopefully with successful candidates or successful agencies. And I see Ms. Boris has her video on, so I'm sure she'll have something really great to add to that as well.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you, Ms. Nodegraff, and through you, Madam Chair. That's a great question, Councillor Doherty. I think the reality is that service providers across the province are recognizing the need to become more flexible in the work that they're doing with clients and be less constrained around what they're funded to do and not funded to do, and mandates. They want to work with their funders to come up with solutions and suggestions, and that is something that our department very much welcomes. So, through the RFP process, we're funders, not operators of these programs and services. And I think that sometimes that gets lost as well. We don't actually provide the services and supports. We look to the system experts to do that. So we will be relying heavily upon those applicants and their experience and ability to inform us how they will look at pivoting when needs change and when they will look at monitoring trends. I mean, we can look at statistics on the database and our by name list, and we can spew those back in a multitude of ways. But what we really want to know from those on the ground is what's happening in your organization. What are you seeing? Where are your pressure points and triggers? Because that's the only way to successfully work together, is to do that. And then hopefully, again, integrating the community in some aspect of those 60 recommendations. There's quite a few that are community-based, and we will be looking to the community for ongoing support, suggestions, ideas, sitting at tables alongside service providers and funders so that they're with clients, so that there is that multitude of voices, ensuring that the conversations continue and happen when they should be happening. So it's one of the things that is very much in the front of our minds as we go through the RFP process, and something that will be an expectation of the service providers who apply. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.
Over to you, Ms. Crete.
So, thank you. Whoops.
Oh, you muted again by accident. I think you hit the mute button.
Okay. Am I okay? All
now
right.
You're good.
Okay, so a couple of things. We had a women's shelter. I can't even remember what it was called. I can't remember when they closed it. But it's interesting that it's now on the table again. Does anyone remember what it was called? I know we had. Michelle has her hand up.
It was called Dawn House.
Dawn House. I knew it was Dawn something. Yeah. And what year was it closed?
I believe that was 2015.
Yeah.
And it was closed as a shelter, but refunded as a transition house. And it's been very, very successful at that.
Has it?
Yeah.
but we still need a women's shelter. So, and the second point, the hoarding coalition. So I mentioned it earlier. Is this in reference to the homeless population with their carts of what looks to be junk? Is it addressing tenants? Where is this coming from?
Through you, Madam Chair, I will start, and I know Ms. Boris has some will chime in as well. So first of all, so for the women's shelter, just to clarify, so homeless housing has been providing beds for women, but obviously it's not in a separate location. And I will be honest, this has been a few years ago, but there was an ask, there was kind of an RFP at the time to ask for somebody that was willing to operate women beds. And at that point, there was only, the ability through Homebase to facilitate that within their existing building. So we've always, I think, as a community, acknowledged that we need at some point a better solution. And it goes back to funding and economies of scale and operators that are willing and able to operate that. So again, looking at numbers and realities, we also know that we have a higher percentage of women that are homeless. So we really want to, again, bring that back to the forefront and work with our partners to see who would be able and willing to continue that service. So that just to kind of clarify. To your question regarding the hoarding coalition, so that is not a new group, it's been an existing group. And it really is, again, a table where we have many partners that address hoarding and how to respond to hoarding. For instance, depending on the situation, there will be different agencies that will be called in, for instance, our colleagues at Fire or, mental health providers. So it is really, the hoarding piece is really an overarching approach, and ultimately with the hope to keep people housed and come up with a plan for individuals that have hoarding challenges, especially when and quite often it is a combination with mental health challenges, to come up with a plan to, again, help the individuals moving forward. We do have funds available through a program called Extreme Clean, which we're also looking at enhancing that program because it's only limited funding. And we also have our discretionary residency benefits and housing prevention funds that we can use should people be in a situation where hoarding becomes an issue and a potential eviction as a result.
Okay. And I actually had a third really quick question. What does siloing mean? I know what a silo is, but how, and I can't find where it's mentioned twice on one page.
Thank you for that question, and to you, Madam Chair. That's actually really, that's a great question, because I know we kind of tend to use some of those words because it's a bit of jargon potentially. So I think what we mean is, basically the need to have better collaboration between different sectors. So for instance, we have a housing sector and a health sector and a social services sector, and it's really like sometimes we're kind of working in our own like silo of housing or health or social services. So it's like a one, having our what do you say it, like our blank, like looking at one direction and not working together.
Right, having your blinkers on.
Yes, that's my Dutch ESL, I think. Blinkers.
Yeah. Okay, that clarifies it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Were there any more questions from the committee before I go to the public? Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of things. I and several people on council at the time fought against the idea of losing a specific women's shelter. And the rationale for that was when it's a kind of co-ed shared space, you may have some women who are reluctant to go there. They may go there and see that a former abuser was staying there. And when we only have a single door to serve them, that creates an issue. It also creates an issue if I'm on parole, condition of parole, you can't be around other parolees. And when we only have a single door shelter and I knock at that door, I have the choice of either risking my parole or staying out in the cold. So I've fought long and hard. We need more than a single door approach to shelters. The other couple of other things that I'm just going to say really quickly, and I'm not sure if staff want to comment on this. True confessions, it really rattles my chain when I hear somebody talk about the integrated care hub as a shelter service. They are not intended to be a shelter service. They become a shelter service on a kind of default, nowhere else to send them. But I've heard stories of seniors that have gone there, not understanding what the nature of the shelter is that they're going to receive, and it's a kind of awkward situation. So I totally applaud what they're doing in the way of public health and dealing with people with substance abuse issues. They're really good at that. They shouldn't be a shelter. And the other thing, in reading the report that rattled my chain a little bit, was the idea that, well, with all the additional money we're putting into affordable housing, we will be addressing homelessness. That kind of trickle down Reaganomics approach to things, it took a decade for us to actually build on Wright Crescent, where we've gained some affordable housing units. But it's no way that there are estimated to be over 100 people living in the rough right now in the city with winter coming. And the idea of, well, look, we're putting more money into affordable housing. That's okay. That will address homelessness. Well, it will in 5 to 10 years, but we need something more immediate to deal with homelessness. I feel better for that rant. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, and through you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify that by no means the pointing out the affordable housing development is a way of preventing or solving the shorter term homelessness issues. It's just, again, that bigger picture of all the things that we're doing short, medium, and long term, and that we need to continue to look at all those things at the same time. So apologies if that came across as pretending we're solving the issue now, because that's absolutely not what we wanted to provide as an impression. What I will say though is we do have some again, not like the next month, but within the next year, also through the rapid housing investment and through some of the funding, we are anticipating to actually move fast on a few projects that will not take hopefully a decade, but will actually come to fruition much sooner. And again, it also really goes back to working with providers that are willing and able and capable to run these different facilities. And that again goes back to having enough staffing and skills to be able to provide that. So good points. And I just want to clarify that it was not an intentional or not meant to take away from the issues that we have at hand right now. Regarding the integrated care hub, again, that was obviously the integrated care hub was initiated combining like the pandemic, the current opioids and drug poisoning crisis, and the housing needs. And you're absolutely right. It's not considered a shelter. It's also not funded through our shelter dollars. It's been and currently is supported through our COVID response dollars. So again, moving forward, longer term, we need to have a plan for where all of these pieces are going to work together. And the integrated care hub and the future of the integrated care hub is also really dependent on provincial healthcare dollars and really, trying to make sure that there is that connection. At this point, the reality also is that I think the staff at the integrated care hub have really been trying to support and stabilize clients and have not really been able to although in some cases they have, but we have not really made that connection, or they have not been able to really make that connection towards finding stable housing solutions. And I think it goes back to having the need for more solutions such as rehab or supportive housing in place so individuals can actually also move to the next stage of their situation. So I don't know if my colleagues would like to add something to that, but great points, and definitely don't disagree with them, and we'll also kind of have a closer look at how things are being written down, because I think it's also sometimes how we interpret certain services as what they are and what they aren't.
Okay, I don't see any other staff members coming on, so maybe we'll move on to the next question, which I see we have Ms. White who has her hand up.
Hi, I just want to kind of be straightforward here. So we've talked about what's going to be happening and all these houses that are going to be built and all this type of thing. But the here and the now is we still have people that are homeless, and the season is changing, and like we say, the integrated care hub is not a shelter. I would like to put out the question, what are organizations or the city going to do to help those people so that they don't have to sleep out in front of the integrated care hub? Is there going to be a facility open so that those people that don't need that particular type of support can go somewhere else to receive it like it was pre-pandemic?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. I can say that there's certainly not a simple solution to the question that you've raised. It's certainly been on the radar of us, as well as all of our funded agencies and community partners. What we are working through and starting to establish is we have a weekly what's called the COVID working group with public health partners, as well as all of our funded service providers, as well, and some internal staff from emergency management. And the discussions are happening now to kind of gear our focus towards kind of that winter planning aspect and what may be available come the colder months. So, it doesn't directly address your question, but it certainly wanted to make you and everyone aware that it's not something that or it's something that we're aware of, and it's difficult. If there were to be a space as well, it comes down to staffing, and what we're hearing from all of our funded agencies is that it's really, really difficult to retain staffing. They're having a lot of staff shortages, and job postings are sitting for a long time. So there are multiple aspects and things to consider when working towards a solution. But having said all that, it is on our radar, and it is something we're trying to work towards resolving.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from committee? Okay, then I will ask Ms. Fawcett, do we have any members of the public who have questions as well?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I do see some initial hands raised. Just before turning it over to members of the public, I wanted to let everyone know that if they wish to speak during this period, they do need to raise their hand in Zoom. That can be found in the center of the Zoom window when you move your mouse over it. And the first to speak, Madam Chair, is Doug Yearwood.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. I'm guessing that my video is not running, so you don't need to see my ugly mug.
Your
No?
video is not running. That's up to you if you want it
Okay,
to.
well, I can't figure it out on my end, but hopefully this suffices. So I mean, there's a few things I've been on waiting to talk for a while. Really, I sort of just want to commend Andy's comments here today on a number of fronts, but you know, her most recent intervention, sort of asking the city what they are planning on doing with winter, you know, just a couple of months away. You know, with all due respect to Mr. Grange, I'm sure that the situation can be complicated from a managerial standpoint, but solutions have been forwarded, right? So just a couple of weeks ago, at a city council meeting, Ivan, who's the general secretary for the Cataraqui Union of Tenants, forwarded the idea that it wouldn't cost that much. I think it's $600,000 or $700,000 to put people up in motels over the 4 or 5 months of the harshest months of winter. You know, to try and overcomplicate things and say that you don't have, you know, the wraparound services or whatever. I mean, I take the point in some instances, but the biggest problem is that people don't have anywhere to live, right? So we're able to maybe make a stopgap measure like putting people in motels. I think that's something that, you know, would be great for the Homelessness and Housing Committee to forward to the city as something that needs exploration, and actually not just exploration, but actually needs to be done. And to Andy's earlier point, when she was addressing CEO Brame, you know, it did, to me, sounded like there's a bunch of excuses that are being made by the head of the Kingston and Frontenac Housing Corporation for why things are the way they are. What I didn't hear is that that KFHC is actually undertaking, is listening to the tenants who are raising concerns, and that they are going to be addressing the problems. I heard her blaming basically people for being poor, for having pests. What were some of the other reasons? I mean, it sort of just seemed like a bunch of scapegoating, their mental health, that they're drug addicted. Not letting people in. You know, so it's disappointing to hear that, because, you know, as I've been walking around all afternoon dropping off pamphlets in the Heights, and we let the people hear what Brame was saying. I had my phone out, I let them hear, and I said, does this resonate with you? And they just laugh. So they don't take what she's saying seriously. They know that it's a lie. There's people, I was just speaking to someone in the Heights about 20 minutes ago. They said that they had about 1.5 inches of water coming out of in their bathroom because there was flooding, and that it didn't get addressed for months. There's people talking about bed bugs, about cockroaches, and it's all just dealt with in such, you know, piecemeal ways, where you have one guy who comes out for an hour and sprays one part of the home, when they know for a fact that there's bed bugs and pests infested everywhere to the foundation. So I really think that there needs to be pressure applied on Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation to deal with things in a systemic way, to stop blaming people for being poor, drug addicted, with bad mental health. I mean, those are all just excuses. So I really want to commend Andy's comments. I think that they were probably the most useful interventions that I heard here today. And I don't know how much more time I have, but I'll just stop there for now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, through you, next to speak is Rod Holloway.
Thank you. Please go ahead, Rod.
Hi, can you hear me? Are you able to hear
Yes,
me?
yes, Mr. Holloway, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad you have addressed the immediate need for housing and shelter for our homeless population. There is a family of 2 adults and 3 children that are living at the Rideau Acres campground. One of the young children, a girl, is severely disabled, and the 2 of the boys are living in a tent. With the winter coming on, this family faces freezing to death. I think there's an immediate need here and possibly elsewhere to do something for this family. Now, the family is homeless. They have tried through home-based housing to get shelter. And the dad has made numerous calls to home base, which have been not returned. In addition to that, there was a call back from home base recently, and they talked to a person there whose name I know, but I'm not going to say who it is. But this person basically said, we're working on it. I'd just like to say that's not good enough. When you have 2 kids in a tent and the other members of the family living in a camper, which is heated by propane, and they have told me that they cannot afford the propane for this, and winter is coming, are you going to let these people freeze to death? That's my question.
Madam Chair, through you, I'm not seeing any further hands from the public. Perhaps we could do a final call. If there's anyone else who wishes to speak to this business item, if they wish to raise their hand in Zoom so that we may call on them. I'm not seeing any further hands, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. So can I ask city staff to please respond to these questions and comments?
Thank you for the questions. I guess I'm not in a position to speak to the KFHC questions from Mr. Yearwood, but certainly the topic of motels is something that we've certainly explored and we continue to explore. That has presented some challenges in speaking with management at various motels, but it's something that we still are exploring and something that we will continue to explore, but nothing definite has been finalized at this point. And to Mr. Holloway's comments and questions, certainly an unfortunate situation, but I mean, due to privacy issues and confidentiality, I'm really unable to speak further on the matter on a public forum, but through discussions with Homebase and ourselves, we'd be happy to continue the discussion offline.
Okay. So that will conclude business item A. We will now move over to business item B, which is the standing update report. And I will head over to Ms. Nordegraff. Was there anything that you or your staff had wanted to discuss prior to committee questions? Again, this was for information purposes only, the standing update report.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. No, again, this is, I think, the third standing report that is really providing the committee, hopefully, and feedback is definitely appreciated, with an overview of the various, items that we work on and that we wanted the committee to be aware of and wanted to update the committee on. So, just really, open to any questions or clarifications that the committee might have on the standing update reports.
Do we have any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask Ms. Fawcett again if we have anyone from the public who would like to address this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't see any hands currently. Again, I'll just remind those who are still with us this afternoon, if you wish to speak to this business item, please raise your hand in Zoom. Again, this is located in the center of your screen when you move the mouse over the Zoom window. Madam Chair, there are no hands.
Okay, thank you. I do want to just take a moment before we move on to the next business item, simply to say thank you to everybody in regards to the business items as well as the delegation for your comments, for your heart, both from our committee as well as from having the public with us as well. For all those who take part in this discussion, all elements of it are critical. It's so important. So thank you for that. And to staff for the updates. Okay, so we will now move forward to motions. Item 8, there are no motions from the committee. So we'll move over to notices of motion. There are no notices of motion either on this agenda. If there are any intents to bring forward a motion for the next meeting, for example, but it would also be required in writing before approval to bring forward. Okay, so having none, in terms of other business, I don't have any other business noted. Was there any other business from anyone? Okay, perfect. And then in terms of correspondence, we did just receive correspondence, which was the addendum. And all correspondence has been forwarded to staff as well. And once again, thank you for the correspondence, for all of the correspondence that gets sent in. Again, anytime you take part, it is hugely appreciated. Okay, so we'll move over to meeting. So the next meeting of the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee will be held on Thursday, December 9th at 1 p.m. Unless, of course, any special meetings are called prior to that. And then the very last item, adjournment. May I have a first, please? Councillor Neal, might I have a second? Thank you. I saw both Ms. Cardy and Ms. Everett. And all in favor, please? Thank you. That carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for being here.